Imagine standing in the middle of a crowded room. All around you, people are talking, laughing, and moving together in perfect harmony, almost like a beautifully choreographed dance. But you are just standing there, frozen. Inside your mind, it is not a dance. It is an exhausting series of complex mathematical equations, constantly calculating exactly when to nod, where to look, and exactly which second it is safe to laugh along with the crowd. Have you ever felt like everyone else in the world was handed a secret manual on how to be human the moment they were born, and somehow your copy was lost in the mail? That crushing sense of isolation, that bone-deep exhaustion after a simple conversation, it is not a flaw in your character. You are not broken, and you are certainly not weird. What you are experiencing might just be the quiet, misunderstood voice of a completely different neurological operating system. Welcome to the reality of the autism spectrum. 2. Let us rewind the clock to 2 hours before that party even began. Our character is standing in the quiet of their own bathroom, looking into the mirror. But they are not checking their outfit. They are rehearsing. They silently mouth the words, "Hi, it is so good to see you," adjusting the pitch, the volume, and the exact tilt of their head. Inside their mind, they are running through a massive, invisible flow chart of every possible conversation, anticipating every potential question, and carefully preparing the socially acceptable answers. This is a habit known as scripting. It is not simply social anxiety. It is rigorous preparation for a test they never asked to take. Then comes the final touch. They carefully arrange their facial muscles into an expression of effortless warmth. The smile looks entirely natural to you, but for them, it requires immense conscious effort. For decades, society believed that autism always looked a certain way, usually involving obvious, visible delays. But the truth is far more hidden. Countless autistic adults move through life completely undetected because they have mastered the exhausting art of masking. They study human behavior like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture, perfectly camouflaging their true reactions just to blend in. But this flawless performance comes at a devastating cost. It drains every single ounce of their emotional and physical energy, leaving them completely exhausted before they even step out the front door. 3. Why do they push themselves to the point of total collapse just to wear that mask? Because we live in a world designed exclusively for typical nervous systems, a world where unwritten social rules govern absolutely everything. Now, our character finally steps through the door and into the party. Immediately, someone approaches to say hello. Throughout human history and culture, looking someone directly in the eyes has been universally demanded as a sign of respect, confidence, and honesty. But for the autistic brain, forced eye contact is not a casual exchange. It is an intense, almost physical invasion. Imagine someone suddenly shining a blinding spotlight directly into your mind. It feels burning, overly intimate, and entirely overwhelming. Glancing away, staring at a nose, or focusing on the background is not a sign of disrespect or shiftiness. It is actually a desperate attempt to lower the sheer volume of sensory input so they can free up enough brain power to actually hear the words you are saying. And then the conversation begins. Human society is built on a messy foundation of metaphors, sarcasm, polite white lies, and reading between the lines. But our character possesses a brain that is beautifully, rigorously wired to process absolute truth. It is a literal operating system forced to navigate a world that constantly speaks in riddles. When an acquaintance says, "We should get coffee sometime," meaning it only as a polite goodbye, the autistic mind files it as a literal plan, waiting for a specific time and date. They are not missing the joke, and they are not being difficult. Their brains are simply built to honor the exact definition of the words you choose, making every casual chat a heavy task of manual translation. The collision does not stop at invisible social rules. The truly fierce battle, the one no one else can see, is raging right now inside their sensory filtering system. As the party progresses, the room fills with more people, more conversations, and more overlapping sounds. For a neurotypical brain, background noise is simply background noise. Your brain automatically filters out the irrelevant data so you can focus on the person right in front of you. But for the autistic brain, that filter is fundamentally different, or sometimes entirely absent. Every single piece of sensory input is processed at the exact same deafening volume. The casual clinking of ice in a glass across the room does not sound far away. It sounds like a window shattering right next to their ear. The faint, high-pitched hum of a fluorescent light bulb above feels like a dentist drill pressing directly into their skull. Even their own clothes turn against them. The tiny, scratchy clothing tag at the back of their neck feels like coarse sandpaper rubbing against an open wound. The perfume of someone walking by is a suffocating cloud. This is sensory overload. It is crucial to understand that this is not a person being dramatic, picky, or overly sensitive. It is a genuine, excruciating physical pain. It is the terrifying reality of a nervous system that is absorbing the entire universe all at once, completely lacking the neurological volume knob that the rest of the world takes for granted. As the sheer chaos of this unpredictable environment swirls around them, a deep, primal panic begins to set in. And this brings us to the next vital coping mechanism. Why does the unpredictable nature of a crowd cause such intense distress? Because an unpredictable situation demands constant, rapid-fire, real-time processing, and their system is already redlining at maximum capacity. This is exactly why you will see our character constantly checking their watch, their eyes locked on the digital numbers, counting down the exact seconds until 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock is the pre-calculated, perfectly safe time they are finally allowed to leave. They might be gripping a specific familiar cup of water, refusing to put it down, tracing its rim in a perfect, continuous circle. This intense, almost rigid need for strict routines, for exact schedules, and for doing things the exact same way every single time is so often misunderstood as stubbornness or a lack of flexibility. But it is nothing of the sort. When the entire outside world feels like a violent, chaotic storm of sensory and social information, a rigid routine is a heavy, unbreakable anchor. It creates a desperately needed pocket of absolute predictability, a small island of safety that keeps their mind from completely drowning in the turbulence. Eventually, the overwhelming tide of the room simply becomes too much to bear. Our character quietly slips away from the crowd, retreating to a dim, empty hallway. There, alone in the shadows, they begin to gently rock their body back and forth. Or perhaps their hands start to softly flutter, or their leg bounces in a rapid, rhythmic tempo. For decades, outdated medical textbooks and well-meaning therapists labeled these repetitive movements as abnormal or inappropriate behaviors that needed to be trained away or suppressed. But modern psychology finally understands the profound, beautiful truth. This is called stimming, short for self-stimulatory behavior, and it is an absolute masterpiece of biological engineering. It is not a symptom of a broken brain trying to act out. It is a highly effective, deeply instinctive tool for emotional regulation. By creating a controlled, predictable, and repetitive physical rhythm, they are actively soothing their overloaded nervous system. They are releasing the massive, dangerous buildup of sensory pressure, gently guiding their brain out of the fight or flight response and slowly finding their way back to a state of peace. It is not something to be stopped. It is a vital, beautiful mechanism of pure survival. But the autistic nervous system is not defined only by overload and fear. If you can step past that deafening barrier of sensory pain, you will touch upon an inner world that is astonishingly vibrant and profoundly deep. There in the quiet dimness of the hallway, our character pulls out their phone. The chaotic noise of the party behind them slowly fades away as they plunge into a highly specific topic. Perhaps they are reading about the intricate history of medieval architecture, the exact migratory patterns of a rare bird, or the hidden mechanics of vintage watches. This is not simply a hobby. This is a special interest, often leading to a state of hyperfixation. Society frequently views this intense focus as a strange obsession that isolates them, making them terrible at casual small talk about the weather or trending television shows. But here is the beautiful paradox. That deep, unwavering dive into a single subject is their life raft. While the human world is messy, confusing, and constantly changing, their special interest is perfectly structured and endlessly rewarding. It is the ultimate safe haven for a brilliant mind-seeking order. And that brilliance brings us to one of the most quietly heartbreaking paradoxes of the autistic experience. Because their brain processes data with such raw intensity, they often possess a staggering ability for pattern recognition. They can easily spot the microscopic order in complex lines of computer code, identify a single wrong note in a chaotic symphony, or understand the staggering mechanics of an entire galaxy. Yet, this exact same brilliant mind can be left completely paralyzed by a subtle shift in a friend's tone of voice. Imagine the silent emotional cost of being able to decode the intricate secrets of the universe, but feeling entirely, functionally illiterate when trying to read the meaning behind a simple frown from someone sitting right across the table. It is a profound type of loneliness, born from the ability to see absolutely everything, except the invisible threads that connect typical human beings together. 6. At this point, you might be asking yourself a very important question. If their inner world is truly so rich and profound, why are autistic individuals so often judged as cold, emotionless, or entirely lacking in empathy? To understand this, let us look back into the party. Suddenly, near the doorway, someone receives terrible news and begins to cry. A neurotypical person might immediately rush over, offer a warm hug, and whisper comforting words. It is the socially expected script for empathy, but our character, watching from the shadows of the hallway, completely freezes. Their face goes blank. Their body becomes completely rigid. To any outside observer, they look entirely indifferent, completely detached from the human suffering just a few feet away. But inside, a devastating paradox is taking place. They are not feeling too little. They are feeling entirely too much. This is the phenomenon of hyperempathy. The sheer force of the other person's grief hits their unfiltered nervous system like a physical shock wave. They absorb the sadness so deeply, so completely, that their brain simply cannot process the massive surge of emotion. To protect itself from a total psychological collapse, their mind executes an emergency shutdown. They temporarily lose the ability to speak, to move, or to perform any of those standard, comforting social gestures. This freezing response is incredibly painful. They care desperately, often far more intensely than anyone else in the room, but they are trapped behind a heavy wall of neurological overload, profoundly misunderstood by a world that only recognizes empathy when it looks conventional. The digital watch finally strikes exactly 9 o'clock. Our character pushes open the heavy front door and steps out of the party, walking into the cool, quiet night air. Taking one long, deep breath, the exhausting mask finally drops. When you look at their journey tonight, the truth becomes incredibly clear. Autism is not a disease. It is not a broken or defective version of a normal human being. Think of it like a brilliantly designed Mac computer being forced to run Windows software for its entire life. It will constantly crash. It will severely overheat. And to the untrained eye, it will look completely broken. But the hardware is actually perfect. It is simply being forced to speak the wrong language. If you recognized pieces of yourself in this video, please hear this. You are not broken. You are not a burden. You are simply operating on a different, beautifully complex frequency. It is time to offer yourself the compassion that the world often forgets to give you. Have you ever had a quiet moment where you finally realized your differences were actually just another way of being human? Share your story with us in the comments below. Let us build a space where no one ever has to wear a mask.